away from her, you bitch!
Imagine your first leading movie role is Ellen Ripley. Great problem to have, but still a problem. Most actors spend a whole career chasing one role people remember. Sigourney Weaver landed hers almost immediately. And not just any role. A template for female action leads that would continue to inspire filmmakers for decades. Almost 40 years on from the career-solidifying performance in Aliens, and that's still the first thing most people think of when they hear the actress's name. Fair enough. She turned a sci-fi sequel into an Oscar-nominated lead, and the performance stopped being a fan favorite and became industry-validated. Add to that the role of Dana Barrett in the first two Ghostbusters movies, another staple that refuses to leave culture, and she was virtually genre-locked in twice before she turned 35. An association that global fandom only deepened. What most viewers forget or don't know is that Sigourney Weaver was not the obvious future face of sci-fi. She was a Stanford and Yale-trained theater actress and a colleague of Meryl Streep at university. In another version of her career, she enters Hollywood through prestige drama or New York comedy, the way her first bit part in Woody Allen's Annie Hall signaled. But her collaboration with Ridley Scott shifted her career and effectively cemented the trajectory we have witnessed in the last 5 decades. Still, despite these two colossal roles, Weaver never shied away from a challenge. And even inside the Alien franchise, Weaver never treated Ripley like a repeatable trick. In the first film, she's the professional. In the first sequel, she's the survivor forced back into the nightmare. In Alien 3, she's almost a martyr, stripped of weapons, glamour, and escape. And in Alien Resurrection, she's not even quite Ripley anymore, but a clone, a corrupted echo of the woman the audience remembers. She was never just protecting the brand. She kept asking the same question in different ways. What else can this role become? The question is the whole career. After Ripley and Dana Barrett handed her two characters most actors would dine out on forever, she never ran from genre cinema, and she never let it set the ceiling. The actress kept taking roles that stretched what audiences thought she could do. And so, to give the movies that reflect this the attention they deserve, here are my top 5 picks for Sigourney Weaver's most underrated movies listed in chronological order. But before we get started, here are a few honorable mentions. Gorillas in the Mist. Certainly a prestige play that was recognized by the Academy with an Oscar nod. Weaver plays a physical, serious, no-glamour character, and she refuses to soften Diane Fossey into someone likable, a role that has since been somewhat forgotten. Working Girl. Her second Oscar nomination in 1988 finds in Nichols's movie the actress playing power as softness. Catherine Parker is charming in public, lethal in private, and Weaver never raises her voice to prove it. She shines opposite to Harrison Ford, Melanie Griffith, and Joan Cusack, stealing every scene she's in. Dave. This is the sleeper honorable mention. She's not doing huge acting here. She's doing warmth, disappointment, intelligence, and grace inside a very gentle political fantasy. She gives the film an emotional floor. Without her, Dave risks becoming too cute. With her, there is real adult sadness underneath the charm. And finally, one to avoid, Deal of the Century. Chevy Chase, Gregory Hines, Sigourney Weaver, and the global arms trade in a William Friedkin comedy sound like successful ingredients. But somehow the movie never lands, and neither do the jokes. Truly one to avoid. And now on to the ranking. At number 5 we have Eyewitness. Right after Ripley, Weaver took on a role pointing the opposite direction. Not the survivor, but the watched. In Peter Yates' Eyewitness, she plays a television reporter, Tony Sokolow, watched for a living, framed by cameras every day. Janitor Daryl Deaver, played by William Hurt, has built a fantasy around her and finds his chance to get closer as he is pulled into the investigation of a murder in the building where he works. The film turns into 3 things at once: a murder mystery, a strange romantic piece, and a study of obsession. It is an early 80s adult thriller, but a strange, loop-sided one. It's not a clean Hitchcock machine. The murder plot matters, But the real charge comes from watching a man project a fantasy onto a woman who is already used to being looked at. So why is this movie forgotten? Partially timing. It arrived during a stretch where Hollywood had Ripley and still had not worked out what to do with Sigourney Weaver. She was not yet the brand. The film itself is also a quieter, messier thing than the glossy, erotic thrillers that dominated marquees during the early 1980s. So it slipped between eras and got left there. But here is why it's worth finding. It plays the male gaze more intelligently than the genre usually bothers to. Hurt's character is not simply in love. He is fascinated, intimidated, and slightly deluded. And Weaver's character, a reporter, seems somewhat detached, as she is already someone constructed by cameras and public performance. The film knows that and uses it. And it shows you how good Weaver is at withholding. Some actors hand you every feeling. She does the opposite. She makes you study the surface and guess, and usually lets you guess wrong. In a film about looking, lying, and projection, an actress who refuses to over-explain herself is exactly the right instrument. For Weaver specifically, this is the post-Alien pre-Ghostbusters version. Glamorous, guarded, intelligent, unknowable. She's not the action survivor yet. She's the object of fascination, and she plays against that by making the character sharper and more self-possessed than the fantasy built around her. A genuinely overlooked early showcase. She would carry that same quality, composure as kind of armor, straight into her next film, released the very next year. At number 4 we have Year of Living Dangerously. Here's the trick of this one. Weaver is supporting, arguably underused, and she still walks off with the half of the film she's in. Sometimes the most interesting place to watch an actor is the role that does not hand them the whole movie. Peter Weir sets the film in Indonesia during the political unrest of the mid-1960s. It follows Guy Hamilton, an Australian journalist played by Mel Gibson, who becomes involved with Jill Bryant, a British embassy officer played by Weaver, whilst the country around them slides towards violence. Everyone here is an observer. Hamilton is a foreign correspondent, Bryant works the embassy, and Billy Kwan, the photographer played by Linda Hunt, watches all of them. It is a political thriller where the politics actually feel unstable. The unrest is not wallpaper. And there's a real sense that these characters are moving through a world they do not understand and cannot control, and that puts the romance on genuinely dangerous ground. This movie often gets overlooked, not for lack of prestige. At the time, Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, and Linda Hunt won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress as a woman cast as a man, which became the story of the film. But the attention clustered around Weir, around Gibson breaking out as an international star, and around Hunt's transformation. And it had louder competition. The same period gave us Missing, the Costa Gavras political drama that took the Palme d'Or and 4 Oscar nominations. But if Missing is the accusation, blunt, prosecutorial, morally outraged, then Year of Living Dangerously is atmosphere. It lets the anger seep through the heat and the watching, rather than spelling it out. The angrier film became the award's object. The stranger one drifted. The reasons to catch this one come down to 2 things. First, it is the less obvious political thriller of its moment. A movie about attraction, ambition, observation, and the arrogance of outsiders who think they can read a country while standing slightly above it. Second, Weaver makes the romance feel adult. There is no girlishness in the performance. She's composed, wary, and emotionally readable without ever becoming obvious. Even when the film is more interested in Gibson's experience, she keeps suggesting a whole other life happening just outside the frame. And from the sidelines of a conflict, the next entry finds the star pulling double duty as the expert and the victim of surrounding circumstances. At number 3, Copycat. This is a smartened version of the role she had been playing for over 15 years, and it might be the sharpest single idea anyone ever had about how to cast Sigourney Weaver. Take the woman audiences know as the ultimate survivor, the one who fights, takes command, walks out of the nightmare, and then trap her inside it. In Copycat, she plays Ellen Hudson, a criminal psychologist and expert on serial killers who survived a violent attack and now lives shut inside her apartment, crippled by agoraphobia. When a new killer begins recreating famous murders, she's pulled back into the work alongside a street-smart detective played by Holly Hunter. On paper, it is one more entry in the 1990s serial killer boom that The Silence of the Lambs kicked off. And yes, it clearly belongs to that wave. But its central idea is different. Weaver is not the young investigator stepping into the killer's world for the first time. She is the expert that world has already broken. This movie is not better remembered mostly because the era in which it was released was flooded. Serial killer thrillers were everywhere in the mid-90s, and a lot of very good ones got lost in the pile. Copycat had the misfortune of being smarter than its packaging suggested. Sold as a standard genre thriller when it was really a study of fear and damage. But the movie is certainly worth your time. First, because it makes fear practical. The strongest thing in the film is the way it turns trauma into geography. Hudson's apartment, her computer, her routines, the exact distance she keeps from the front door. The film understands that fear is not only screaming. Sometimes it is the way a person quietly rearranges an entire life around one terrible thing never happening again. And the Weaver-Holly Hunter pairing gives the film real substance. Hunter brings movement, impatience, and street-level energy. Weaver brings stillness, intellect, and dread. The film is at its best when it lets those two opposite charges push against each other. For Weaver, this is the role that uses everything the audience assumes about her and then twists it. Brilliant but trapped, authoritative but fragile. Intelligence as both a strength and a prison. By 1995, everyone knew Sigourney Weaver survived. Copycat is the film that shows you what surviving costs. That sense of fear and confinement becomes quieter, colder, and much more domestic in the next film on this list. Just two families, a dead-ended suburb, and a woman who seems to have turned disappointment into a personality. At number 2, The Ice Storm. For someone whose most famous characters fight so hard to live, Weaver took an unexpected turn with Janie Carver, a woman who simply stopped wanting to. Same control, opposite engine, and it produces one of the finest, coldest performances Weaver has ever given. Directed by Ang Lee and set in suburban Connecticut over Thanksgiving weekend in 1973, The Ice Storm follows two neighboring families as affairs, disappointments, and emotional neglect surface during a literal ice storm. It is one of the great films about suburban numbness. Nobody stands in the rain screaming the truth. Everything is colder than that. The horror lives in the silence, the politeness, the casual cruelty, and the dawning sense that everyone has mistaken freedom for emptiness. Weaver plays Janie, a bored, elegant, sexually direct, and emotionally unreachable neighbor drifting through an affair she barely seems to want. The movie has kind of faded from conversation. Strangely, not because it was dismissed. The title was a critical hit, and Weaver won the BAFTA for Best Supporting Actress and was nominated at the Golden Globes for her performance. The film was admired, but it is so chilly, so adult, so unwilling to give the audience a big emotional release that it never became a cozy rewatched modern classic the way warmer 90s ensemble dramas did. The commercial underperformance couldn't make up for all the goodwill the movie amassed at Cannes. It is respected and underloved, which is a particular kind of forgotten. The reason to watch is obviously Weaver, and specifically what she refuses to do. She makes glamour feel dead inside. Janie could have been played as seductive or tragic or monstrous. Weaver plays her as someone who checked out years ago. Beautiful and not warm. Funny and not generous. Present yet not really available. This is extremely hard to do without flattening the character into a symbol, and she never does. The whole film also rewards patience. It is an ensemble of quiet devastations, and her storyline is one of the quietest and most devastating in it. This is the Prestige Weaver and the Strange Weaver in the same performance. Awards recognized at the time, then quietly allowed to slip out of the highlight reel. And I cannot recommend this movie enough. It's really time to go back for it. After The Ice Storm, the only place to go is somewhere warmer, sillier, and somehow just as revealing. So Weaver returns to science fiction, but not as the person holding the nightmare together. This time she is trapped inside the joke, the costume, the catchphrase, and the memory of a role everyone else refuses to forget. Topping this list is Galaxy Quest. This is the whole video in a single film. An actress playing an actress stuck with a genre role the public will not let her outgrow, smiling through it, and quietly the most self-aware person in the room. If one comedy explains the strange bargain of Sigourney Weaver's career, it's this one. The premise is perfect. The cast of a cancelled sci-fi TV show are mistaken for real space heroes by aliens who watched the old episodes and believed every frame was historical fact. The actors then have to live up to the parts they once played for a paycheck. Weaver plays Gwen DeMarco, whose job was to repeat what the computer said and who knows exactly how little the role respected her. So why call a film that made real money underrated? Because of the gap between what it did and what it deserved. It earned around $90 million worldwide against a reported $45 million budget. So this was not necessarily a commercial disaster. But the gross was heavily domestic, and the joke depends on specific fan literacy. Conventions, catchphrases, typecast actors, cancelled shows, and the grammar of television sci-fi. That traveled brilliantly at home, but less well abroad, leaving it as a beloved cult favorite rather than the mainstream comedy classic it plays like. The movie's on this list because it's one of the rare parodies that loves the thing it mocks. Most spoofs age badly because all they know how to do is sneer. Galaxy Quest understands Star Trek, actors, fans, bad costumes, and the strange dignity of people who care too much. It defends all of it, even as it laughs. The ensemble is outstanding. Tim Allen, Alan Rickman, Tony Shalhoub, Sam Rockwell, and Weaver each play a different flavor of showbiz humiliation. For the alien actress, it is the perfect meta role. By 1999, she's one of the faces of modern sci-fi, so casting her as a woman boxed in by a costume, a catchphrase, and a role fans remember more vividly than she wants them to is the joke. She never plays Gwen as stupid. She plays a smart woman who knows exactly how absurd her job is and shows up and does it anyways. So there you have it. Ripley made Sigourney Weaver immortal. Galaxy Quest is her laughing about exactly that, and it is the most honest thing in her filmography. I guess the whole point was never that Sigourney Weaver escaped Ripley, because she didn't. The point is that she kept proving the icon was only one version of her. The reporter who refused to be read, the embassy officer holding a whole life behind her eyes, the expert that fear had hauled out, the suburban wife who had quietly switched herself off, and the actress laughing at the cage genre built around her. Cold, funny, wounded, severe, glamorous, awkward, controlled to the millimeter. This is a strange gift of being validated too early. The world decided who Sigourney Weaver was before she had finished deciding herself, and she spent the next 40 years answering back, one unexpected role at a time. But if Alan Ripley made her iconic, these 5 films are why she stayed interesting.